Hi, welcome back to Machynlleth. Firstly, my last video seemed to prove immensely popular, so thank you for everybody who watched that and subscribed. This video I'm going to be going back doing a bit of scenic work behind the station building, and I'll just show you what my plans are. So I'm going to be addressing this little triangle here. In real life there's actually a little house on this area. I'm not quite sure when it was built. I think it could possibly be post-war. I'm not sure whether it was present in the 1930s. I haven't got any pictures to prove either way. However, because of the compression that I've had to make, there wouldn't actually have been room for that little house anyway. So I'm just going to make it into sort of station master's garden area. There's some evidence with the house that there was some a little vegetable patch in this area and some Scots pines. So I've made some bespoke picket fencing to run along the sides here, and a gate that's going to go across the bottom of the entrance to the station yard, and we'll put a little vegetable patch here and a few other sort of flower beddy type things. So I designed and cut some picket fence on the laser cutter. It's similar to the off-the-shelf ratio product that you can get, but I've designed it so that it's got it can be used on inclines a bit better and irregular surfaces. It's not just a pure cut, it is a three-dimensional product with individual pickets, posts and rails. Looks very similar to the ratio picket fencing that you can get, but it's just a little bit more versatile. I think it bends better over the contours. I've got gates here and a prototypical gate for the main entrance. Okay, I'm going to do two little vegetable patches here, just because they fit slightly better as two rather than one large one, because that starts sloping off down there, and if it was square like that, it'd be quite a big step on the corner there, so I can just offset it. The vegetable patches are really fiddly. It's a bit of a lean over here for my back to do fiddly things, so I'm going to make them off the layout and glue them down afterwards. So I've cut some little oblongs of 1mm card and chamfered the edges. We'll cover those with the soil, and then we'll put the vegetables on there and stick it down once it's done, and then once they're blended in we can do the grass, static grass around the rest of the garden. And I was thinking around this sort of side I might put a little flower bed that sort of runs all the way along this edge there with some sort of roses and just usual cottage garden flowers, just to brighten the area up. And then of course we need to do some Scots pines that are in this area here, and they'll be fairly juvenile in the 1930s. The photos I've got from the 1950s show fairly mature trees, and they're still standing today if you visit the site. So I've just got a little bit of Mod Podge here, matte Mod Podge, let down with a bit of water just to make it a little bit more runny. And yeah, I've just got some fine soil mix, so you can just sprinkle that over the top. Make sure we get it on that chamfered edge that we went to so much trouble to make. I'm just going to scrape it off here so I don't glue it down to a piece of off-cut wood, and the same again on this side. So I'm going to start off making a few lettuces. So I've got some, this is sort of tissue paper that you find things wrapped in, but it's a nice pale green colour. And we'll just start off, we'll just cut off just a little square, a bit more than a centimetre square. And we're just going to wrap it up into a little ball. That's probably maybe a little bit small for a lettuce, that sort of size. Dip it in some Mod Podge just so it holds its shape, and there we go. The next one may be a little bit bigger than that, I don't know. Screw it up, dip it in some Mod Podge. There we go. So we'll carry on making some of those. So we've got a selection of little lettuces drying there. Now I'm going to make some cauliflowers. So this is just normal toilet tissue. Same principle, we're going to make the hearts for the cauliflower first. Same sort of principle, cut a little square. Yeah, just use one ply. Roll it into a ball. Dip it in the Mod Podge. Roll it into a little tight ball like that. There we are. And then we'll make the outside leaves with some darker green tissue paper. So I've got some slightly darker tissue paper. It's actually the same paper. I've just painted it with a darker green acrylic. Allowed that to dry. You cut a little piece off. Place your cauliflower heart with a dab of Mod Podge in the centre of that, and then just sort of carefully sort of twist, wrap it round like that, so it's more or less all covered. You all know what a cauliflower looks like. It's a bit of a fiddle because it wants to stick to everything. So there we are, the end of that. We've got a load of little cauliflowers. They look quite convincing. So next we're going to make some carrots. I've got some medium green woodland scenic field grass. Just put a little bunch of it, dip it into some Mod Podge, and just convince it to stick together in little strands like that. So if you get it worked out, if you get it and twist it together like that, and then just dip it onto the surface of the glue and then keep twisting. You get a little ball of glue that just holds it in the place in the centre, and if you just leave it to dry so it's resting on something, leaving the glue so that it's not touching anything, and then we'll cut down that glue once it's dry to give us two little carrot stalks. So now we'll go back to our carrots. We've got our little twists of long grass and with a section of glue in the middle, and we'll just, with the fibrous bit, just cut away a bit like that, tease it out like that. And the same for the other side, tease it out a bit. Now again, I've got some scenic glue here and some scatter material. I just put a bit of glue on the teased out end. And there we have it, and then we can cut those in half when they're dry. Right, I'll try and make a few little potato plants. So I've got a bit of sea moss here which has been sprayed green. Just take a little snip off there, just a tiny amount. Dip it in some dilute Mod Podge, and then into, this is Woodland Scenics medium green. Tap off the excess. We put our little potato plants like that. So coming back to our potato plants, I've got a pipette here with a bit of scenic cement in, just a couple of drips on there. Let it absorb through all the scatter material. A big bubble there, and then just put some flowers on. I've used this stuff before. This is embossing powder from sort of the craft side of the industry, and you just get a little bit on the end of a brush and tap it on there. It doesn't show so much at the moment with the white glue, but once that's dried, the glue's dried, that'll come up with little white flowers like you get on potato plants. So our next vegetable, it's going to be some leek or onion stalks. So I've got some more tissue paper. It's got a bit of a pattern on, but we're going to paint over that, so not worried about that. I've got some green acrylics here because onion stalks, leeks start off sort of a pale white near the base, darkening off to a darker green near the tips of the leaves. So we'll have the base on this side, and I'm just going to start with some lighter green. That's darker green. There we are. So that's a sort of a blended lighter to dark green, and we'll let that dry for now. Right, we're going to turn our attention back to the leek stroke onions. That's dried nicely, so I'm just going to cut. I've got a nice new sharp blade for this. Just going to cut through the darker sections. In fact, that's way too tall for an 00 scale leek. There we go. So as you can see, we've got sort of white blended through to darker colours. So I'm just going to start cutting vertical cuts into the paper, and if we cut a section off like that, hopefully you can see we've got a sort of a comb effect there. And now a little fiddly bit, we're going to roll that with the paint bit section on the outside. So roll the base as tight as we can, and then we can spread out the leaves like that. It's a bit messy, that one. We'll try and get some slightly tidier ones. So there we go. Carry on making some of those and get them planted. So there we have a couple of rows of leeks. I'm now going to make a little row of, I think, what will turn out to be beetroots. So I've got these long rows of the Pico or WWS Scenics self-adhesive water meadow tuft strips. They come in sort of, some of them are thinner than others, so I'm going to take one of these thin ones. I want the vertical fibres, so I'm going to just gently trim down the edges, so I've just got vertical fibres. And then I think with beetroot it's going to be a sort of a maroony colour, so these are quite easy to paint actually. So I'm going to paint in a maroony colour for the stalks, and then we'll add some foliage leaves to the tops of them. So if we just take a little strip like that, I think one little strip will probably be enough. And then there's quite a lot sticking out the side to these, so just with a sharp pair of scissors, so on each side. So they're all tufts are all nice and vertical, a little bit long if anything as well. I might just give them a bit of a haircut. There we are. I'm going to give them a little paint. They're self-adhesive, so they'll stick down to this piece of paper here. So I've got this, I just found in my box of paints, a maroony colour from Life Colour. It's this sort of, so just get some of that and just start, say, fibres take on paint really quite well. Shall we get it right down to the bottom? There we go, we put that aside. The stalks have dried okay now, so just going to put a little bit of Mod Podge over the tops of the stalks. Like that. And we'll give it a jolly good dip in our foliage, so hopefully that's all going to stay on properly. We've got red stalks underneath and green foliage on the top. I'll give you a better view of that when it's dried. It's a bit difficult to handle at the moment. I'm going to start planting some of our veg now, so I'm going to start with our double-ended carrots like that. So if we simply cut them in the middle down the bit that's tough and glued, we end up with a little carrot plant like that. And just to make sure that we know it's a carrot plant, I'm going to stick it in with a little bit of Mod Podge that's been coloured orange, so you can see a little bit of the carrots sticking out of the top of the soil. So we're just going to do a bit of our Mod Podge there, and we've got, this is a Revel, it's called brown, but actually it's a very orange colour. I use this on my bricks a lot. See, we'll just start colouring our Mod Podge with a little bit of that. See, there we are, lovely carrot colour. So this is my planting tool. It's just a pin vise with a pin in it instead of the usual drill bit. I'll just cut the end, the thick end of the pin off so it'll grip it. And then we're just going to make little holes in which to plant our carrots. In a nice straight line because we're tidy gardeners. Then we just dab, get a little bit of a orange glue and plant that. As if you can probably see there, you can just see the little bit of carrot poking out the top of the soil. So we'll carry on with more of those. There we are. Now hopefully you can see a little row of fairly convincing carrots. I've got some more left, so I'll put a second row on when that's dried. Right, similarly we've got our little potato plants here. As you can see, the little white flowers now stand out now the glue's dried, and they're pretty robust because we've soaked them in scenic glue. So in a similar way to the carrots, except without orange glue, we'll just do this with normal white Mod Podge. We're just going to plant them in rows. I'm actually going to have a little bit where the someone's actually been digging the potatoes up, so I'm going to start right at the edge here and get just a bit of Mod Podge on the bottom and just roughly put it in place. Okay, we'll carry on in rows along here. So there we are, we've got 5 little rows of potato plants there. Put them aside to dry. So here are a little row of beetroots with their sort of reddy brown stems and nice bushy foliage. It's just going to be a simple little line of Mod Podge and plant that in place. So now I'm going to start planting some of these little lettuces and cabbages. I've got a bit of Mod Podge there. I've let it go a little bit tacky, just because these haven't actually got any sort of root to hold them in place. So it's just a case of pick them up, have them in the glue and plant them. So there we are, there's a couple of rows of lettuces. We'll do the same thing with the cauliflowers. There we go, coming together nicely now. I might do just a couple of little rows of some random plants there, running out of sort of specific vegetables to do. So finally for this area, I'm just going to put a couple of rows of random vegetables. Bit of Mod Podge there. And we've just got some mid-green ground foliage. So we're back out on the layout, and the little vegetable patches sitting in situ. I've just got to glue them down. Then I'm going to make some flower beds around the outside of the fencing area, and I think this gate leads up quite a steep little slope, so I think I might use some DAS clay just to make a few steps up here that'll appear in the grass. The first thing I'm going to do is just make a few little steps up here. Just going to use a little bit of DAS clay, just have a little sausage like that, and just squish it into place. I think I better take these out before I break them. So there we are, a nice little set of sort of rustic steps. I'll just paint a bit of sort of a beigey colour on there, and they can have grass growing over them just to make it look a little easier to get up that steep slope. Next I'm going to just make a bit of a flower bed around the edge of the fencing. This is just a bit of Mod Podge, just a little line like this, about the width you would expect a flower bed to be. Also might put a little bit more soil around the edges of our steps. I'll put a bit more Mod Podge there, and put a bit more of our soil mix. Slightly lighter colour than the one I've got on as the base layer. Just sprinkle that over. Now I'm going to glue these in place. So there's a slight bend there. These are nice and flexible actually, so just bend them so that they conform to the landscape a bit better. There we go. I'm just going to pop a load of Mod Podge on the back of these. On a good layer so that it fills all the gaps between the ground cover that I've already got down and this. I'm actually going to pin these down just to make sure they conform to the contours of the land that's already there, just with some drawing pins. Doesn't matter about that. Coming out there, I'm going to put a little shoulder on there. So there we go. We'll leave those to dry for a little bit. Okay, with those in place, I'll let them dry. Along this area here, in real life, there's some Scots pines. Now, there must be, you know, 80, 90 years old now, and they're very mature trees. I don't actually have a picture of what they look like in the late 1930s. Got some pictures of them in the 1950s where they're sort of moderately sized trees. On my old layout I had some Scots pines near one of the stations, and fortunately when I took that apart I saved all my trees, so I'm going to get them out of the box and see if we can resurrect them. So these are the Scots pines I've just taken out of my old storage box from the old layout. They are shall we say a little bit tired, but I think we can reuse the armatures. So if we just pull some of the old foliage off, we'll be left with some reasonable armatures to work with, because it does take a while and a bit of a faff to make tree armatures. So if you can save them, the more the better. So there we go, that's tree armature, and that was simply made with fine copper wire, a traditional method of twisting and twisting and twisting. I coat these with a mixture of polyfiller, wall filler and PVA glue, so there is some flex in the trunks without cracking the cracking the effect. Gives you a slight texture to it. And then I spray them with one of the sort of textured paints from B&Q. This is a little bit grey, this one, for a Scots pine. Scots pines have a sort of a gingery, reddy sort of colour to their bark, so I'm going to give them a spray to freshen up the colour when I've finished fiddling around and sort of resurrecting these armatures. So this is Army Painter in leather brown. It's a sort of a gingery sort of colour. We'll give them a coat of that and see where we look like. They are a little bit too brown for me and a bit too uniform, so I'm going to give them a light spray of just a grey undercoat to lighten that up now. Now I'm going to go back to my HelloFresh, but you could use any sort of polyfibre. Just want to pull it apart, make it fluffy and light and airy. I'm not sure how well this shows because it's against a white background, but yeah, if we make it fluffy and light and airy. So got a nice airy looking tree there. So next I'm going to give it a coat of the same sort of browny colour and then apply some static grass to it to give it a bit more of a twiggy appearance. While that's still wet, just going to sprinkle over some, this is 4mm autumn grass from WWS Scenics. And just sprinkle it over to give it a bit more of a random appearance rather than using an applicator to make it stick out. And in fact, actually, I think that's dried a little bit too much, so I'm going to put a little bit of the layering spray on. So that's got a bit of layering spray on now. Yeah, that's sticking a lot better. And try and get the spray just on the foliage. You don't want too much of it sticking to the trunk. So leave that to dry for the next stage. So the next stage is going to be some fine dark green static grass over the top to give it that pine needly effect. This is Knock 2.5mm dark green. We'll get the hopper loaded up and we'll give it a coat of that. So I'm just going to put a layer of static grass layering spray onto avoiding the trunks and the branches as much as I can onto the foliage. I'll do that off camera, and then attach the clip to the bottom of the tree. Just start giving it a little shake. It's 2.5mm grass, comes out pretty quick. And trying to avoid putting too much on the trunk and branches. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of static grass stuck to the trunk, but I find if you just get in there with a stiff brush, give it a good scrape, most of it will come off. Finally, just to keep everything in place, I'm going to give it a good coat of good old hairspray. So all my trees are drying. These have now dried and stuck down, and I want to blend the edge of these flower beds in. So we get a bit of Mod Podge. If you're wondering why Mod Podge, it's because it doesn't dry, it dries matte. More expensive than PVA, but it gives you a much matter finish. It doesn't bleed through and leave you with shiny soil. So fairly straightforward. The wrong place, so we'll leave that to dry, come back and nervously hoover off the excess and hope we don't suck all our vegetables into the vacuum cleaner. So there we are with everything temporarily in place. The trees are in temporary holes, giving it a little vacuum. This morning's job is we're going to pretty much finish this area off with a bit of grass base layer. I just need to put a little bit of colour on these steps. This is just a beigey grey acrylic. Okay, I've removed all the fences and trees to get the grass down. The effect I'm looking for is some longer grass around the edges and down this embankment here, with shorter grass in the centre area. So I'm going to be using my usual sort of longer grass mix of sort of 4 and 6 millimetre lengths, and then WWS Scenics 2 millimetres summer grass in the centre area. I'm going to put the thicker, heavier grass on first. So I'm just going to put a bit of Mod Podge just around the fence posts down the side of the entrance road. So the effect that I'm aiming for basically is sort of a lawn section in the middle that's sort of been tended and mowed, and everything outside that has just been left to get longer. I'll fill my hopper with my usual sort of mix of longer grasses. Get a good layer. A nice thick layer on that. I'm not too worried at the moment that it's relatively transparent, because I'm going to go over the whole area in some 2 millimetre grass, which is going to fall in through the longer grass and fill up those gaps. So next step is I'll put glue over the rest of it to receive the 2 millimetre cut grass. And we'll hoover up the excess without the camera on. So there we have the finished grass effect. I think those little flower beds look, vegetable patches look quite convincing and nicely bedded in. So we'll wait for that to dry. We'll glue some fencing in. We'll need to make some flowers to put in the flower bed along the side there, and that's looking quite good. Okay, everything's been left overnight to dry. I admit I missed out a stage that I normally put in the grass of putting a base layer through. It's showing through a little bit, but you know, it still looks like a lawn from sort of normal viewing distances. So this area, it is showing through a bit. I was sort of expecting that. I don't mind that too much. I'm going to on the photos that I've got of the real area. There's a lot of sort of ground ivy and ground cover on this other than grass, so I'm going to put a bit of that on now. So I'm going to start with the Woodland Scenics dark green foliage. This is this matte stuff that's sort of, you know, the usual foam mixed in with some polyfiber, and if we just spread that out, quite a bit of it. Let's brush that out of the way because I don't want this to stick to the road when I start getting the hairspray out. So just a liberal dose of hairspray where you want it. You know, pull some out. And just pat it down. Give it a bit more to keep it in place. More down here. Tease it out. And I might mix some of this, which is the medium green, in with a little bit of variation. Bit more dark down towards the end here. Not too keen on the join here, so let me just get a little bit, pop that over the fence there where it's overgrown, just hide that bit of that fence join, which isn't great. And there's a little slightly bald patch down here. Let's just put a little bit down here under the trees. Well, where the trees will go. Now I'm going to brush up all this extra before I put a layer on. I don't want all this sticking to the road, and then we can sprinkle that on top to just add to the effect. And here's a useful little bit of advice. Make sure you move these out of the way before you start hoovering things up. I've just had to cut open the hoover bag and fish £5 worth of Woodland Scenics foliage out of a dusty hoover bag. So yeah, just watch what you're doing. So I'm going to put a series of sort of small shrubs, probably roses or something like that, along the fence there. So I've just got the medium Woodland Scenics foliage that I've just fished out of the hoover bag. Just cut off a small clump there. Dip the end in a bit of Mod Podge and plant it wherever you want. Okay, I'm going to try this method that I've seen before for making flowers. I have used the embossing powders in the past. They're very, very tiny. I want something slightly bigger this time, so sort of represent roses. So I've heard of this. You should put some wax crayons in the freezer and then just simply grate them with a cheese grater. And there we seem to be having lots of little, yeah, so we'll give those a little try. So I've got a bit of WW Scenics layering spray. And then just using a brush. And to keep them all in place from the distance, so I don't blow them all away. This is just some hairspray. Don't worry, the road, which has been darkened there by the hairspray, will dry much lighter again. So the last job really to do is just put all the buildings back in, plant the trees, and we're pretty much done. So last little job is we're just going to plant the trees. That's very simply just a daub of glue on the trunk. And there we are. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found making the individual vegetables useful and interesting. And I hope to see you in the next one.